All right, now joining us on the broadcast, we've got Mr. Dov Zakheim, who's a former Undersecretary of Defense in George Bush's administration, currently the senior advisor at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Mr. Zakheim, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on WION. Now, I first want your reaction on this latest development of the Americans having seized this oil tanker that currently goes by the name Marinera, that apparently the Americans had been chasing for the last 2 weeks, and that also was accompanied by a Russian submarine. In your assessment, this tanker, which according to reports was apparently not filled up with oil, why was it so important, and why were the Americans chasing it in almost what would be a confrontation on the high seas with a Russian submarine?
Well, for a couple of reasons, actually. Thank you for having me, by the way. To begin with, the view in Washington is that this isn't really a Russian-flagged ship. It was reflagged while the ship was on the open ocean. And so, in a sense, it's part of the American policy to squeeze Venezuela. Now, of course, the president has said that we will get as much as $50 million worth of $50 billion worth of Venezuelan oil, which he claims was illegally seized when the oil companies were nationalized back in the 1970s. The second reason is, frankly, to send the Russians a message. The Russians, as you know, have been deploying what are called shadow fleets, trade with sanctioned companies, with sanctioned countries. Of course, Russia itself has been sanctioned. And this is a message that we are not going to put up with that.
Right.
And what is, of course, fascinating is that the Russians may have had a submarine, but they didn't do anything with it. And that, I think, is a clear message that Russia is not about to confront the United States.
Do you think, in your assessment, that a lot of conflicts can emerge out of what could be an effective miscalculation? The fact that there was a Russian submarine nearby that was also going along with this oil tanker, is the United States willing to get into a confrontation with Russia on the question of this shadow fleet?
Well, what I think just showed you is that Russia is not necessarily willing to get into a confrontation with the United States. You've got to remember that Russia has its hands full with Ukraine. The Russians have seen the United States literally pluck the president and his wife of Venezuela hundreds and hundreds of miles away from the American border and bring them back to New York. Russia wanted to do the same thing with Zelensky 4 years ago.
Right.
Ukraine is on Russia's border, and they couldn't do it, and they're still fighting. This is a real message to the Russians and, frankly, to the world of American capabilities. I just don't think the Russians are in a position to confront us. They're certainly not going to go to nuclear war over the seizure of a ship that, in any event, was not really Russian to begin with. And they just don't have the conventional capability to confront us. And frankly, they wouldn't dare.
All right. No one underestimates the American military capabilities there, Mr. Zakheim. But I want to also ask you to weigh in on another very interesting thing that you touched upon, where the United States of America would want to get a deal to the tune of $50 billion of Venezuelan oil. That is effectively all oil that comes out of Venezuela. And the reasoning the Trump administration has been giving forth is that this is oil and assets and wealth that Venezuela owes to the United States of America. Now, once Venezuela had nationalized its oil assets, firstly in the 70s and then again in the 1990s, the American oil companies went to this World Bank's arbitration court. This is the global world order that is the rule of law which functions. And the World Bank's arbitration court had awarded compensation to the American companies, part of which was paid, part of which is still due. Why is the United States of America not willing to adhere to an arbitration court awarding compensation to the American companies instead what has been shown by the American administration here is that might is right, and therefore the Americans can go swoop in and lay claim to the Venezuelan oil. Why not accept what the arbitration courts say in this matter?
Well, if I were sitting in the administration right now, I would say, first of all, the companies have not been fully compensated. And when you start adding up all the interest over the last, I guess, 1990s, we're talking a good 25 years or more. That number is going to be huge. And so, in a sense, if you just run the numbers, there's a pretty good case for demanding the Venezuelan oil. Whether, in fact, all of this is going to happen is an entirely different question, and we simply cannot predict the future. When I was in the administration many years ago, I was there at the beginning when we went into Iraq, when we went into Afghanistan, and that got a lot more complicated than we had anticipated at the time. I cannot predict what's going to happen in Venezuela, and depending on the relationship that we have with the Venezuelan government and who is the Venezuelan government, that will very much influence whether we get compensated. But to argue that the World Court decided 30 years ago or so.
No, this was a compensation award that was given in 2019. There was a compensation award that was given in 2014. That was not complied with. It again happened in 2019. The Venezuelans turn around and say the reason why we can't pay the United States of America is because of the crippling sanctions, which has made us incapable to pay up to these U.S. companies.
Well, the sanctions, of course, were there because we felt that the Venezuelans were supporting the Russians, were working with the Chinese, and of course they're being sanctioned as well. And in terms of, again, the entire amount, even under the compensation that was laid out 6 years ago, that has not been paid. So you've got a number of reasons, it seems to me, why the administration is trying to do what it's trying to do. On the other hand, as I say, it's not at all clear how this will all play out.
Interesting. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Davzakan, for joining us with our perspective there.
Thank you.